After landing a wild trade yesterday, the truth has been revealed on why the Wizards did what they did, but also how there are more moves coming for this team, as with a two-way spot still open and the roster now still having one open spot, there are a lot of names being thrown out there, but one in particular that we saw over the summer is leading the pack. We're going to highlight what the likely next move or moves for the Wizards will be, and some inside stuff on the behind the scenes of what went down. All of that coming up on this episode of Wizards Digest. Thank you guys for supporting every single day. All the latest news, 2 videos yesterday, another one today. Make sure you're subscribing for all the latest content every single day on your Washington Wizards. To start, just want to run through a couple quick things. If anyone was curious about the second round pick that went down in this trade, this is part of an Athletic article that'll be linked down below. Sources said the Wizards will receive a second round pick that will be the second most favorable of the following. Some ridiculous predictions on these picks. You can pause and read through them if you want to, but I did want to dive into one interesting aspect here, Nick, and that's the relationship here between Will Dawkins and Trey Mann, because Will Dawkins was the Thunder's VP of basketball operations when they selected Mann with the 18th pick in the 2021 draft. 5 years later, Dawkins just acquired Mann to bolster his team's guard depth. Now, as you mentioned yesterday, as a lot of us know, it's probably just going to be a one-year thing. Trey Mann, not exactly known to be the best playmaker, but this is just one of these interesting wrinkles as to, GMs going after guys that they're familiar with. And honestly, when they do that, sometimes it can actually work out for the better.
Yeah, they were going for guards. Obviously, they were linked to multiple other guards. They ultimately landed with a man in Trey, who is again, I had a whole video on it yesterday. Clearly, Will Dawkins likes him. He's dated back now to a few years ago. So had a bit of a rough season last year compared to expectations, but he did only play 12 minutes a game. If he can be a spark plug off the bench, play some of the backup guard spot, point guard / shooting guard, he's basically a combo guard at this point. It does make some sense, but the more I've kind of, you can see here some of his shooting splits. The more I've looked at it, the more I've thought about it. Clearly, it's just a guy that Will Dawkins wanted.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And, I think it's still going to be Bub's spot to lose as the backup point guard, with Trey Mann kind of just filling in whenever he needs to. And again, if there's an injury or there's, load management, whatever you have, it's good to have an extra guy that can bring the ball up, even if he's not the best playmaker, maybe not the perfect guy to go behind Trae Young. But hey, we'll have to see. Now we also have 3 Trays, which is just starting to get a little confusing. But there is another aspect to this, and that has to do with Juju. Of course, a lot of fans were not super happy that he left. Some fans saying, he wasn't actually that good in the first place. I don't know. I liked him, but there's a few different ways you can take this. Josh Robbins mentioned in his article that Reese likely became expendable after the Wizards acquired the draft rights to second-round pick Felix Okpara. Of course, we saw a bit of Okpara in the Summer League, and we also are going to talk about him a bit because he's on the receiving end of a lot of passes of the player that we're going to mention for the next move for the Wizards. Solid numbers in college, 8 and 6, but he's just kind of a high energy big man, 36% from 3. But we saw him have some good games. But really, there were some other wrinkles to this Reese thing. They had to include Julian Reese due to the touch rule, which states that when 3 or more teams build a multi-team trade, every team in the deal must touch at least 2 other teams, which is part of the reason he had to get sent out. And also, as Free Thinking One points out, the Wizards can't re-sign him, even though he was waived by Denver. The NBA's reacquisition rule creates a waiting period. The Wizards can't go back out and get Reese until next summer. So just a few little question marks there for Reese. Nick, I know a lot of fans liked him. A lot of fans maybe were more questionable on him, but it is another little... He wasn't just a throw-in for the sake of throwing in. There was a purpose for him there. It is unfortunate he won't be able to continue with the Wizards, at least not for a calendar year, but I can't help but just wish him the best, because I did like watching him play.
Yeah, I think that's one part of the trade fans didn't love. Cam Whitmore, not a big deal. You get draft capital back, but giving up on him a little early per se might come back to hurt them, because he had some really good run in limited time last year. But at the same time, it did, in theory, have to happen. Now, it didn't have to happen with Reese. It could have been any player for that regard, but clearly they saw Reese as an opportunity to to move off him. He got waived right away, so someone, I guess, will be on the outside. And again, cannot re-sign, makes it a little bit... they weren't going to re-sign him anyway. It's not like that. The thing is, though, you look at their big men depth, you look at their power forward depth. I actually think there would have been a decent role for Reese this year. The question now becomes beyond that. Clearly, they view Chris Middleton and Champagnie as guys who can actually go out and play minutes. Obviously, right, they signed them, but I don't know. I was a little bit higher on Reese. That's the only part of the trade I don't like. At the same time, I do ultimately think when it's all said and done, Trey Mann will have an impact on this team better than what he did last year for his respective team.
Yeah, and he won't be put in as many situations where he kind of needs to do things, and I think maybe a little less pressure will help him. But as you can see here, the depth chart has not been updated to include Trey Mann or get rid of Julian Reese, but you can just see here where Reese would have fit in. But again, Okpara, does he make him expendable? Maybe, but just a couple of wrinkles there. But we want to dive into the next likely moves for the Wizards, because getting rid of a two-way player and then getting rid of a roster player in Whitmore and just taking one roster player back does open up some spots here. So when we're looking at two-way contracts, there is one name that we talked a lot about, Nick, over the summer. And actually, I think the highest viewed video that we did was talking about this player, and that is Reese Beekman. I don't know what's up with the three Treys and then Reese and then Reese, and anyway, it's going a bit weird. But Reese Beekman, that last game in Summer League, 13 of 14, we'll roll some highlights here. A couple of lobs to Okpara, which is pretty cool. Dude, look at those back-to-back plays. Remember those in Summer League if you were watching then. He had some moments there where you could shoot too, a lot of lobs, some floaters, some threes. But he was a great playmaker, but most importantly, the dude was a defensive stalwart. I mean, Reese Beekman is a guy who has a history, like award-winning defensive player. Like, this guy is locked down on the perimeter. And you talk about the future of the Wizards, maybe wanting some extra guards. Again, we don't know if Trey Mann's going to be here beyond just this season. A guy like Reese Beekman, to me, is a nice low-risk type of ad that could maybe cut your rotation in a year or two. And it's as Free Thinking One mentions. And also, we heard some other rumblings from, other people that Reese Beekman definitely is a target that the Wizards are looking at bringing in. So you can see one Reese is out, another Reese could be the last two-way. What do you think? And we're chopping up some of the highlights there that they posted, some other stuff from Summer League. What do you think about Reese Beekman as a fit, Nick? I know we raved about him over the summer. I like the idea a lot. Obviously, there's no path for him really to play on the Wizards roster this year, but with the go-go, I think he could have a really solid year. He's never put up crazy scoring numbers in the G League. He's been around for a couple of years, but I think he's just a guy that I'd like to have in the organization.
Yeah, whoever they do decide to pick up is clearly, once again, someone that they really want, because they also, maybe they moved off of Reese because they wanted to specifically open up that two-way spot to get somebody. Now, is it Beekman? I mean, in the past, we talked about the bunch of, 2 or 3 guys. Seth Trimble is not available anymore. So I think Beekman makes the most sense. It won't be next season. You could have him play in the G League, develop there, and then maybe this time next year, we're talking about him breaking the starting rotation. But I think not the starting rotation, the actual team. But whoever it is, I think Will Dawkins clearly has his mind not necessarily made up on who it is yet, but I think there was some intent behind opening up that two-way spot, and that's what makes it interesting. You still have another actual roster spot as well that probably won't be DeMar DeRozan. We covered that. Maybe, though. He hasn't signed with the Nuggets quite yet, but there's a lot of moves to come, and specifically for the two-way spot, that's going to get, I think, solved a lot sooner than people think. And I think it's probably going to be Reese Beekman, but it could also be somebody in the big man department, whatever Will Dawkins is planning. But I think internally they have a better idea than initially.
Yeah, I think there's got to be a plan here. Now, again, it's a bit weird because Julian Reese was kind of included, maybe to free up the two-way spot, but also because the Wizards couldn't be included in this trade if they didn't send him somewhere else, right? So they had to pick someone. And they could have just said, well, I don't really want to be in this. I don't need to go get Trey Mann. I think this trade originally, was reported without the Wizards in it. So I think you're right. I think there is some intent here, whether it was to free up a two-way spot or specifically to target Trey Mann, like is probably likely considering what we talked about earlier with the relationship there with Dawkins and him. There's a lot of interesting wrinkles going on now, and there are still a lot of open questions heading into training camp, heading into regular season with the two-way spot, the regular roster spot. Do you think Reese Beekman's a good idea? Do you think the Wizards still have a chance to go land another big name? Let us know down below, but that will do it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in every single day. A whole lot more coming past this. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Nick Gosse. We'll catch you in the next one.